When shocking news surfaced, the gospel music industry came to a halt, leaving millions stunned and incredulous. The inspiration behind some of the most uplifting gospel songs ever written, Kirk Franklin, is going through one of the most trying times in his life. A seemingly ordinary day swiftly devolved into a tragic moment that nobody anticipated. The devastating reality is difficult for the industry, his fans, and even close friends to grasp. Kirk made a rare public appearance at a charity performance just a week ago, but people who know him well knew something wasn't right. The brightness was gone from his eyes. His normally upbeat demeanor became unsettled, and his sentences were slurred. He grinned on stage, but it was obvious that the smile was concealing something more serious. From a different perspective, that performance might have been a quiet farewell to a typical life. Kirk Franklin was battling emotional issues behind the scenes, but no one was aware of them. He had been quietly coping with unpleasant family problems. His connection with his adopted son had soured in recent months, according to people close to him. Emotional quiet, distance, and heated disagreements had built a wall between them. However, the call was made at approximately 3 in the morning that demonstrated Kirk's actual level of hardship. According to a friend, all he said during that call was, "I can't do this anymore." That one line caused everyone to get concerned. Then the catastrophe struck, shattering him beyond recognition. Kirk lost a cousin who was not only a kin, but also a mentor and greatest friend from childhood. Kirk was first exposed to gospel music by this man, who also supported him during his early hardships. He was like a second father to Kirk. It was like losing a piece of his soul when he passed away. Kirk was devastated to learn of this unexpected demise. Although he didn't make a public comment, people close to him claimed that he shut himself in his studio and wasn't seen for 2 days. All of Kirk Franklin's planned concerts and tours were canceled in the wake of this unfortunate incident. In a brief statement, his record company requested understanding and privacy during this trying time. Kirk was now sitting in quiet in the studio where he had once produced upbeat and uplifting songs. According to one witness, Kirk repeatedly whispered, "Why, God? Why now?" as though he was attempting to make sense of an inexplicable question. When fans realized Kirk had not posting anything on social media, they were alarmed. Days later, hundreds of people were moved to tears when they saw a picture of a handwritten note that read, "I need time. I need healing. Please pray for me." On his Instagram, love, prayers, and support poured into the comment area. In their own supportive posts, Yolanda Adams, Tasha Cobbs, and Jonathan McCrowds, all fellow gospel musicians, urged the public to join Kirk in prayer. A tiny glimmer of optimism emerged in the midst of this gloom. Kirk was recently seen away from the bustle of the city and business at a spiritual retreat center. He is looking for answers, healing, and tranquility, according to a close friend. The companion said, "He's broken. He's not finished yet, though." Fans found some solace for the first time in weeks after hearing those remarks. Kirk Franklin has long been recognized for his strength, in addition to his musical abilities. His melodies, which are full of hope and faith, have helped many get through their worst moments. He is now the one who needs to be lifted in this heartbreaking chapter. All we can do as fans is support him, offer up prayers for him, and let him know that he is not alone despite his suffering. Sometimes the strongest voices are the ones that weep in quiet, while other times the brightest lights conceal the darkest shadows. However, if Kirk Franklin has taught the world anything, it is that grief never has the last say and that healing is genuine. This may be a devastating time for Kirk Franklin, but his journey is far from over. As one of his most moving lines states, "He'll never put more on me than I can bear." It all appeared to be another motivational night. Kirk Franklin stood center stage, doing what he does best, touching hearts with his voice and spirit as the auditorium filled with people, their voices raised in applause. However, those who were paying close attention could tell something wasn't quite right. Behind his normally bright eyes, there was a fatigue and a heaviness. And that night is now being recalled as the point at which everything began to fall apart in light of the most recent tragic news. Before stepping away from the limelight, Kirk Franklin made his last public appearance at a gospel benefit event in Atlanta. The purpose of the gathering was to generate money for Kirk's favorite cause, disadvantaged youngsters. He grinned warmly at the audience as he entered the stage in his trademark fashion. However, something was lacking. Although strong, his voice lacked the fire it usually possessed. His words of support were more subdued, even uncertain. He stopped in the middle of one sentence and looked down as though he was trying to contain his tears. Supporters believed he could simply be exhausted. Years of performing and personal stress can wear you down, but we now know that it was more than simply fatigue, it was emotional strain. Kirk hardly spoke to anyone before or after his performance, according to backstage observers. He kept to himself, skipped interviews, and came late. Just before he took the stage, one of his assistants remembered seeing him sitting by himself, blankly staring at the floor while holding a battered Bible. He sang Imagine Me, a timeless hit, on live. However, it sounded different this time. It was more than just a show, it was nearly a prayer. He hung on to some of the lines with a shaky voice, closed his eyes longer than usual, and ended the song without his customary smile. He gave a small nod in response to the applause from the audience, but remained silent. No anchor was present. Not at all. May you be blessed. Just a silent way out. Fans started making online guesses that evening. Some questioned whether Kirk was battling a personal disease. Some speculated that he might be dealing with stress at home. Nobody could have predicted the severity of what was actually taking place. Behind his gaze, an inner storm was quietly building. After the show later that night, hotel employees said Kirk stayed in his room all night and refused meals. His loved ones now acknowledged that he used the concert as a means of overcoming the suffering. A final attempt to maintain strength before everything eventually became too much to bear. The news of a devastating loss in Kirk's life was revealed a few days after that performance, leaving both Kirk and his fans in shock. All along, there had been warning flags. However, everyone missed them at the time. His melancholy, his quiet, and the tears that were concealed from view. They all make sense now. It was more than just a show. It was a song disguised as a call for assistance. Behind the closed doors of Kirk Franklin's home, a quiet storm had been brewing long before the news broke and long before he disappeared from the public view. It seemed to the outer world that Kirk Franklin had it all: fame, faith, and a devoted family. The majority of people were unaware, however, that his heart was already shattering at the exact spot where he ought to have felt the safest. Kirk has been candid about his complex connection with his oldest son for years. They had already made news for their adventure, which was full of ups and downs. However, things had suddenly become more terrible and dismal. According to close sources, the tension between them had become intolerable. The emotional scars were just too deep. Even with therapy, spiritual direction, and attempts at recovery, even prayer was unable to bridge the heartbreaking distance, the disputes, and the protracted silences. Someone close to the family claims that a phone call that descended into an unpleasant altercation was the tipping point. Words were uttered that were harsh. Old wounds reopened. Confusion, tears, and emotional exhaustion marked the call's conclusion rather than its conclusion. This felt like a failure to a father like Kirk, who had dedicated his life to attempting to lead, protect, and love his son. The grief of losing him, not to the outside world, but to his own emotions and soul, tore at his soul. The hush that ensued made it even more difficult. Days went by with nothing but emptiness, no note, no apology, no word. According to friends, Kirk started to distance himself from both his family and himself. Hours would pass while he sat in his prayer room, sometimes crying and frequently whispering to God. He gave up performing music. He ceased to laugh. The man's words of faith had raised millions, but now he was unable to raise himself. At approximately 3 in the morning, Kirk gave a close friend a call. There were only 5 chilly, silent words out of his mouth. "I am no longer able to do this." It wasn't an attention-seeking utterance. They were a plea from a weary, broken, and exhausted man. The friend was startled by the call, and efforts were made right away to see how he was doing. Even yet, Kirk maintained that all he needed was some alone time with God. This was more than a family dispute or disagreement. This was a more profound form of heartbreak, one that pierces the soul. The guy who dedicated his life to helping others, Kirk Franklin, was suddenly the one going through quiet pain. However, nobody outside of his immediate circle knew. The pressure increased over the next few days. Although he made an effort to maintain appearances and smile for his admirers, his inner world was collapsing. Family is more than simply blood to Kirk. It serves as a base, and everything else trembles along with that foundation when it begins to crumble. People frequently believe that the lifestyles of public individuals are ideal. However, the burden of personal suffering can bring even the most powerful leaders to their knees. Furthermore, Kirk Franklin did not attribute that pain to the outside world. It was from the individuals he cared about the most. A father was silently begging for peace in his own home behind the stage, the music, and the preaching. And sometimes the most difficult battle of all is that one. Certain life events might leave a lasting scar. There are days when we are severely broken. It never really recovers. It was an unexpected moment for Kirk Franklin. He was already dealing with emotional upheavals in his family, and life dealt him another setback, one for which he was never ready. Everything changed with a one phone call, and the man who had helped millions of people get through their darkest times now found himself in his own. The call came in on a calm Tuesday morning. According to reports, Kirk was home by himself after spending the night in prayer and quiet. His heart broke as he heard the news on the other end of the phone. His spiritual guru, brother in religion, lifetime friend, and cousin had unexpectedly died. No sickness, no notice, simply gone. It might have appeared to the outside world to be simply another family tragedy. But this was much more to Kirk. He was initially exposed to music by this cousin, the person who gave him his first piano and who sat with him in church seats when they were young boys with aspirations of using the gospel to change the world. He was more than family. He was the cornerstone. This cousin was reportedly referred to by Kirk as his anchor in the storm. This man had supported him through all of his hardships, including his struggles with addiction, his recovery, and his ascent to fame in music. Always in the background, providing support, love, and strength, not on stage or in the spotlight. It was more than just a loss of family when we lost him. It was the loss of his roots, his heritage, and a part of himself. Kirk remained silent for hours after hearing the news. According to those close to him, he simply sat on the floor with a childhood picture of the two of them. He cried in silence, trembling and whispering, "Not him! Lord, not him!" It was a grief too heavy for prayer, too deep for words, and too bitter for music. Worst of all, Kirk hadn't spoken to him in weeks. They had been caught up in the tangle of personal issues, work, and life. For someone who always stressed love, connection, and forgiveness, not receiving a final farewell was a wound that cut to the core. That regret now plagued him, adding to the already unbearable weight on his heart. In the days that followed, Kirk completely shut down, avoiding calls, canceling appearances, and refusing to leave his house. Kirk kept his head down at the small private funeral that followed, knowing that this was more than just sadness, it was destruction. He didn't touch his instruments, and for a man whose life had always been full of sound, silence now surrounded him like a wall. Those closest to him feared he was sinking into depression, but they respected his space. This tragedy was not simply another chapter in Kirk Franklin's life. It was a turning point. He didn't sing, he didn't talk, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't try to be strong. He let himself grieve, not only the loss of his guiding light, but also the death of his cousin. Even in that pain, there was a quiet strength growing beneath the surface because Kirk Franklin had always taught that God is closest to the brokenhearted. And even though this loss broke him, there was still a part of him that believed healing would come. That was the moment everything stopped. The moment even faith felt distant. For now, though, all he could do was mourn. For over 30 years, Kirk Franklin has been the beating heart of gospel music. The world may have known him as a legend, a leader, and a light. But on that day, he was just a man, broken, heartbroken, and attempting to survive one of the most agonizing losses of his life. Kirk has always used his craft as a form of healing, whether it was joy or pain, faith or fear. He turned his emotions into melodies that inspired millions. His energy, his voice, and his message have filled concert halls, churches, and homes around the world. However, after the tragic loss of his beloved cousin and the emotional weight of family tensions, something unthinkable happened. The music stopped. Not even music, however, could save him in the days after his cousin's death. And his team promptly sent out a silent message to fans announcing that all future shows, tours, and studio sessions would be delayed until further notice. The words were straightforward, but the silence that accompanied them spoke a lot more. Kirk Franklin had always used the stage as a haven and a place of release, but now it felt like too much. He couldn't lead worship, he couldn't face crowds, he couldn't act like everything was fine. According to his longtime sound engineer, Kirk once entered the studio, glanced at the instruments, and remained silent. The engineer said, "I've never seen him like that," and he just turned around and walked out without even sitting down. He simply stood there, glanced at the piano, and walked away. The once passionate and creative studio turned into a place of silent sadness, with the lights remaining muted and the microphone remaining covered. Friends and collaborators, profoundly concerned, opted to respect his quiet, and fans all around the world started asking questions. Kirk, the guy who had once danced across platforms and shouted praises with fire, now hardly left his home and was numb, not angry. Those closest to him realized that this was no longer about music, but rather about survival. He wasn't abandoning his career out of choice, but rather out of necessity. Some wondered if he was taking a spiritual hiatus, while others worried that this might be the end of his career. The heart that had composed innumerable songs was now broken, and when a heart breaks, everything else stops with it. According to a close friend, Kirk had been privately journaling, not with lyrics, but with letters to God, his cousin, and his son, pages full of questions, pain, and unvarnished honesty. In the meantime, the world waits not just for the return of an artist, but for the healing of a man, because sometimes even the strongest voices must fall silent before rising again, while the tour buses are parked and the arenas are silent. Perhaps those letters will become songs one day, but for now, they remain just that, fragments of a healing man trying to find his way back to peace. Fans waited, worried, and prayed for weeks, while Kirk Franklin remained silent, no new music, interviews, or appearances, until one unexpected social media post sent shockwaves through the gospel music community, leaving millions of people holding their breath. Late one night, Kirk posted an unexpected black and white picture of a cross against a stormy sky. The 10-word caption read, "Even the strongest fall when the soul can't breathe." It contained no hashtags, emojis, or explanation, but within minutes, the internet was ablaze with love and concern from fans who flooded the comments. Some believed it to be a cry for assistance, while others feared the worst. People were shocked to see that this was not the Kirk Franklin they knew, the inspiration, the force, the spiritual warrior. Pastors, gospel singers, celebrities, and even people outside the church community started reposting the article, urging prayer, asking questions, and pleading for Kirk to get in touch. Everyone knew what he was going through, even though he didn't explain it in detail. They had seen the canceled shows, heard rumors of family strife, and sensed the void left by his cousin's death. But this post confirmed what many had suspected. Kirk was in a lot of pain. After just 2 hours, the post was swiftly removed, but by then, screenshots had already gone viral, and fan pages were delving into every word, asking questions such, "What does soul can't breathe mean?" And "Is he okay?" Others drew attention to the image's symbolic meaning, pointing out the cross, the black sky, and the loneliness. That night, thousands of people came together online to pray for Kirk. Virtual vigils were held on Instagram Live. Gospel choirs across the nation dedicated songs to him, and churches spoke his name from their pulpits, encouraging people to not only pray but also reach out to anyone in their lives who might be suffering in silence. It wasn't just a post, it was a message from someone who felt totally alone in the storm. Even though Kirk didn't publicly reply, the post had a significant impact because it reminded everyone that even the strongest people need love, and that sometimes the people who appear to be the most composed are the ones who are crying the loudest on the inside. For years, Kirk Franklin had been a source of hope for others, but now the world saw him not as a celebrity but as a human being who was hurting, vulnerable, and in need of healing. After weeks of heartbreak, silence, and worry from fans worldwide, Kirk Franklin made a quiet decision. That simple post, though heartbreaking, became a moment of unity, drawing his fans closer and reminding them that faith doesn't mean you never feel pain, but that you keep holding on even when the storm feels endless. He didn't seek solace in music, fame, or even friends, but instead sought solitude to listen to God. He checked into a small spiritual retreat tucked away in the Texas countryside, where there was only a chapel, a Bible, and acres of silence. This was a revelation to his team, but it made perfect sense to those who truly understood his heart. Kirk followed a strict routine at the retreat, waking up before sunrise, reading scripture for hours, and walking alone through quiet fields. He didn't tell anyone, not even his closest industry friends knew, and he didn't make the announcement to his followers. A man who had spent most of his life surrounded by noise, applause, and schedules found this silence startling, but necessary. As he spent time writing not songs but raw prayers, painful, honest, and occasionally angry conversations with God. The only sounds in the morning were the soft whisper of the wind through trees and the song of birds. According to one journal post, "Why do you take the people who keep me together, Lord?" Another, "If I feel this broken, am I still your servant?" Kirk replied, retreat staff, kept to himself, barely ate more than a few bites, and didn't participate in group activities or talk unless asked to. He knelt for hours, often in tears, in the chapel where candlelight flickered against stained glass, whispering verses and repeatedly giving up his pain. One night, he remained there until dawn, and the following morning, a note was discovered at the altar. It was not signed, but those who read it knew it was his. "I don't need answers," it declared. "That line, 'I just need peace, and I'm willing to wait for it,' perfectly captured Kirk's experience. He needed to be reminded that he was still loved, held, and seen despite all the suffering, loss, and regrets. Kirk wasn't looking for fame, clarity, or even healing. All he wanted was to feel God's presence once more. On the last day of the retreat, he played the piano for the first time in weeks, not for a crowd, not for a record, but only for God. Staff stood silently outside the chapel and listened to the tearful melody, which was only a few broken notes and whispered lyrics, but it contained hope, a sign that a light was still flickering somewhere deep within his pain. Kirk quietly and unobtrusively left the retreat, but something had changed. He was still standing, his eyes were still filled with sorrow, but his shoulders were lighter. His voice was steady but gentle, and he wasn't yet healed. In a world where so many people pretend to be strong, Kirk chose to be genuine and didn't cover up his pain with a smile. Time has a way of healing what words cannot, and for Kirk Franklin, after months of intense heartbreak, agonizing silence, and introspective retreat, something inside him started to change. He didn't jump back into the spotlight right away. Instead, he took a step back and let faith do what it does best: restore in silence, rebuild in stillness. He wasn't finished yet. Kirk returned after his time at the spiritual retreat, but not on stage or in the studio, but in the most surprising way. It wasn't a big announcement or a breakthrough. It happened gradually, like the sun rising after a long, endless night. A basic video, with no music or editing, showed Kirk sitting beneath a tree and staring straight into the camera one morning. His eyes were serene but tired, and his voice was steady yet soft, before he said, "If you're watching this, I just want you to know I'm still here." The video was less than 2 minutes long, but it brought millions to tears. It was a confession, not a performance. "I've been through a storm I wouldn't wish on anyone. I've lost people I love, faced silence that almost broke me, and fought things I didn't think I could overcome. Grace held me." That brief statement ignited a fire in the hearts of fans everywhere. The world had missed his voice, but more than that, they missed his light. He was a man stripped of pride, speaking from a place of raw truth. He didn't tease a tour or promise a new album. He just promised something greater. He would keep going. The world was ready for him. His ability to stand in the fire and still point to heaven caused messages of love, support, and celebration to pour in from all over the world. Churches started playing his older songs again, but with a deeper meaning. Gospel choirs dedicated their Sunday services to him. More significantly, though, he was ready for the first time in a long time. A few weeks later, Kirk went back to the studio to write what he called letters of healing through music, gathering his choir, old friends, and producers not to produce a hit song, but to worship instead. Then came the news that fans had been praying for. A special live concert was planned. One night only, free admission. It was a night of faith, healing, and music, and the event sold out in minutes, not because of hype, but because of heart. The sound that emerged wasn't perfect, it was honest, raw, full of brokenness and hope. When Kirk took the stage that night, there were no flashing lights or a loud introduction, just him holding a microphone and smiling gently at the audience, and his first words weren't lyrics but testimony. "I've been broken, I've been quiet. People didn't come to see a star. They came to stand with a survivor." The room erupted, not in applause, but in worship. Kirk didn't perform that night. Instead, he poured out. Every word and note was a piece of his journey. "I never stopped believing that God still had more for me, though. If you're hurting, too, I need you to know something. Your narrative is not done." By the end of the night, one thing was certain: Kirk Franklin had not simply come back. He had risen. He was no longer merely the voice of gospel music. Instead, he was the embodiment of something much more significant: healing through surrender, survival through silence, and resilience through faith. As a result, the devastating news that had once rocked the world had taken on a new meaning, a potent reminder that there is always hope for the future, even after the darkest nights.